The stars above flickered with the endless dance of the cosmos, a timeless show of celestial bodies drifting in their vast spaces. But below, on a forgotten station at the edge of the galaxy, something unusual was happening. The hum of machines and soft chatter of engineers were interrupted by the sudden arrival of a strange transmission. It wasn't a call from a nearby ship or a routine check from the galactic forces. This was different. This was an invitation. The Galactic Council, the most powerful organization in the universe, had sent a message, a request, a demand, depending on how one saw it. The Council had ruled the galaxy for centuries, their control absolute. Their word was law, and every species under their influence was bound to follow their orders. No questions asked, no rebellion allowed. For eons, the Council had ruled unchallenged. That was, until they set their sights on a new species, humans. The humans had become a mystery, a puzzle that many species of the galaxy could not quite understand. They had arrived in the galaxy only a few hundred years ago. They were primitive, chaotic, and dangerous in their own way. But there was something about them that intrigued the Council, something they had underestimated in their first encounters with the humans, something powerful. So they sent the message, a simple message, but one that would change everything. It arrived on a quiet, routine day of the human station, a research facility nestled on the fringes of human space. The crew had been working on their usual tasks, fixing equipment, reviewing data, and ensuring the station's systems were intact. But when the message was received, their work stopped. The whole station seemed to freeze. The message was transmitted to every corner of the galaxy, but the humans were not ready for the weight of the words they would see. The Galactic Council had spoken directly to them, offering an invitation. They wanted humanity to join the Grand Council, to become part of the elite group that controlled the galaxy. The message was clear. Join us. Accept our offer, and you will prosper beyond your wildest dreams. Reject us, and there will be consequences. The offer was tempting, but the consequences were not. The Council was not a group to be ignored. The message carried with it the weight of 1,000 worlds. Yet there was something about it that seemed off. The tone was calm, almost too calm, as if the Council had forgotten one important detail. They didn't know humans. They didn't understand them. The humans weren't like the others the Council had encountered. They were different. They were unpredictable. They were stubborn. They did not bend easily to anyone's will, and that was something the Galactic Council had not anticipated. The news of the message spread quickly through the ranks of the human crew. Some of them were excited. The Council's invitation was a sign of recognition, a chance for humanity to rise in the galactic ranks. Some of the crew believed this could be a chance to prove themselves, to show the galaxy that they were worthy of respect. But others were more cautious. They had heard rumors about the Council, how they manipulated species, crushed revolts, and held the galaxy in an iron grip. They knew this offer came at a cost, and they weren't sure if humanity was ready to pay it. Among the crew, one man stood out. Captain Aiden Hayes was known for his sharp mind and strong leadership. He had served in the human fleet for years, and his experience had taught him to question everything. Hayes was not easily swayed by the allure of power or the threats of the Galactic Council. He believed in humanity's strength, an undeniable, raw power that had yet to be unleashed. Captain Hayes sat in his quarters, staring at the message on his screen. His eyes scanned the words again and again. Join us. Accept our offer. Reject us, and there will be consequences. The consequences were clear, but what did the offer really mean? What did the Council want from humanity? And most importantly, why had they chosen now to make this offer? He thought back to the earlier encounters with the alien species. Some were timid, afraid of humanity's unpredictable nature. Others, like the Khazar, had underestimated the human resolve, believing that their advanced technology would crush them without a fight. But the Khazar had been wrong. Humanity had stood tall, defended itself, and fought back. The humans had something the others lacked, a fire within them that refused to be extinguished. Captain Hayes leaned forward, tapping his fingers on the console. "They think we'll bend to their will," he muttered to himself. "They think they can control us, but they don't know humanity." It was true. The humans had survived countless hardships. They had faced extinction and emerged stronger. They had fought wars on their home planet, battled alien invasions, and conquered space itself. The galaxy had underestimated them. And now, the Galactic Council thought they could simply add them to their ranks. But Captain Hayes wasn't so sure. He knew humanity's potential. He knew what they were capable of when pushed. He had seen it in the battles, in the sacrifices, and in the unyielding spirit of every human who had ever fought for survival. This invitation was just another test, another challenge to prove their worth. "Humanity doesn't bow down to anyone," Hayes said, his voice filled with conviction. "Not even the Galactic Council." As he made his decision, he knew the consequences of rejecting the offer would be severe. But he also knew one thing for sure. Humanity had never been a species to shy away from a challenge. And this time, they would not be the ones who bent. Captain Aiden Hayes sat in the darkened room, his thoughts swirling like the endless stars outside. The transmission from the Galactic Council still lingered in his mind, every word echoing in his ears. He had read the message so many times that it was starting to lose its meaning. But the weight of it, the pressure of the Council's words, couldn't be shaken off. Join us, or face the consequences. What did that truly mean? Did the Council expect him to kneel, to bend to their will and accept whatever they were offering? He couldn't trust them. The Council had their own agenda, one that didn't include humanity's well-being. Hayes was no stranger to tough choices. His time in the fleet had been filled with difficult decisions, battles, and betrayals. But this was different. The Council wasn't just any adversary. They controlled the galaxy. They held the power to shape the destinies of entire species, bending them to their will. For them to reach out to humanity was a sign. It could be a test, a game, or maybe just a tactic to break the human spirit. The room was silent, save for the occasional beep of the station's systems. His crew had gathered in the mess hall, waiting for his decision. The pressure was mounting. They knew the Council's reputation. They knew that rejecting the offer could have dire consequences, and they also understood that accepting it meant giving up their independence. Hayes felt the weight of those decisions pressing on him. Outside the window, the stars seemed to stretch on forever. Humanity had come so far, from a single planet to a thriving interstellar species, yet here they were, faced with the choice of whether to bow to a foreign power or stand their ground. Humanity had never been one to simply accept its fate, and Hayes wasn't about to change that now. He leaned forward, running a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the responsibility. He couldn't make this decision alone. He needed input from his crew, from the people who had fought beside him through the darkest times. They had built humanity's future together, and it was only fair that they decided what came next. He stood up, pushing the chair back with a loud scrape. It was time. The crew gathered in the conference room, the atmosphere tense. Hayes stood at the head of the table, looking around at the faces he had come to know so well. Each one of them had a stake in this decision. Some were excited by the offer, believing that joining the Council could give humanity an edge in the galaxy. Others were more cautious, fearing that the Council's offer came with strings attached that they couldn't see yet. There were a few who believed the Council was trying to manipulate them into submission. "There's no easy way to say this," Hayes began, his voice calm but firm. "The Galactic Council has made contact with us. They've offered us a place at the table. But we have to decide whether we want to accept that offer or reject it." The room was silent for a moment as the crew absorbed the news. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The weight of the moment hung in the air like a storm about to break. "We can't trust them," said Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, Aiden's younger sister. She had always been the more cautious one, ever since they were kids. The Council is known for manipulation. They don't give anything for free. If we accept their offer, we'll lose our independence. Captain Hayes nodded. He had known his sister's stance on the issue. That's true. But think about what this could mean for us, for humanity. We could have access to resources, knowledge, and technologies we've never even dreamed of. The Council could help us expand our reach, secure our place in the galaxy. And what happens when we disagree with them? Lieutenant Sarah pressed. What happens when they tell us what to do? We can't just hand over control like that. We fought to get here, to stand on our own. We can't give that up. The room murmured in agreement. Many of the crew members felt the same way. There was no way they could allow themselves to be controlled. They had fought too hard, endured too much, to simply hand over their fate to the Council. But the captain's thoughts were elsewhere. His eyes drifted to the viewport, where the station's glowing lights illuminated the cold, distant stars. Humanity had never been known for surrendering. They had survived war, famine, and extinction. And now, the galaxy wanted to challenge them again. But this time, it was different. The stakes were higher, and humanity would have to prove its worth. We don't have to decide right now, Captain Hayes said, turning back to his crew. But we will need a strategy. We can't just ignore them, but we also can't accept their offer without knowing what it truly means. He paced around the room, his mind racing. Humanity was at a crossroads, and there was no going back. If they rejected the offer, the Council would likely retaliate. The consequences could be disastrous. But if they accepted, they could lose everything that made them unique, their freedom, their independence. The room fell silent once more. Everyone was deep in thought, considering the implications of their choices. I know one thing for sure, Captain Hayes finally said, his voice firm. Humanity doesn't bend. We never have. We never will. Whatever we decide, it will be on our terms. The decision was made. Humanity would not bow to the Galactic Council. The weight of that choice began to settle on Captain Aiden Hayes' shoulders like a 100-ton anchor. He knew there would be consequences, but he didn't realize just how soon those consequences would come knocking. It didn't take long for the Council's response to reach them. The transmission was brief, but its message was clear. You have made a grave mistake, Captain Hayes. The galaxy is not yours to command. Prepare for the consequences of your defiance. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Hayes stood frozen, staring at the cold, mechanical image of the Council representative, his words still ringing in his mind. A mistake. Defiance. What did that mean? The captain wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. The Council wasn't known for idle threats. He turned toward the crew, his face grim. They were all waiting, and he could feel their eyes on him, searching for guidance. They had all expected something like this, but hearing it, seeing it, made it real. Now they were not just defying a political body. They were challenging the very balance of power in the galaxy. What now? Lieutenant Sarah Hayes asked, her voice calm but filled with concern. Her eyes were steady, but even she could feel the tension that was thick in the air. It was one thing to make a decision. It was another to face the consequences. Captain Hayes took a deep breath. Now we prepare. The Council will not let this slide. They will come after us, no matter what we do. What are we supposed to do, Captain? Another voice asked from the back of the room. It was Ensign Corin, one of the younger crew members, his voice tinged with both fear and hope. We're just one ship, the Council. They control the galaxy. A murmur of agreement passed through the crew. Many of them shared that same fear. The Galactic Council was powerful, with fleets that spanned the stars and resources that humanity couldn't even begin to comprehend. But Captain Hayes wasn't about to let that stop them. We're more than just one ship, Hayes said, his voice firm. We're humanity. We've survived against impossible odds before, and we'll do it again. The crew nodded, but the uncertainty in their eyes remained. It wasn't just a matter of surviving. It was a matter of fighting back. The Council wasn't going to accept their refusal quietly, and it was only a matter of time before they struck. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the Council was seething with rage. They had underestimated humanity. They had thought they could force them to comply, to join their ranks like so many other species before them. But this was different. The humans had refused, and the Council could not allow such insubordination to go unpunished. "We cannot allow this to stand," said Councillor Vathar, his reptilian eyes flashing with anger. He had long viewed humanity as a nuisance, a species with too much potential and too little control. But now they had crossed a line. Their defiance must be crushed before it spreads. The other members of the Council nodded in agreement. For millennia, the Council had ruled with an iron fist. To let one species, one human, defy them was unacceptable. There had to be consequences. "We will send the dreadnought," Councillor Eris suggested. His voice was cold and calculated, his tone devoid of empathy. The dreadnought was a weapon of unimaginable power, capable of destroying entire fleets in a matter of minutes. It was a symbol of the Council's power, and it would show humanity just how outmatched they truly were. Back aboard the ship, Captain Hayes was already putting his plan into motion. He wasn't about to let the Council take them down without a fight. If they thought humanity was weak, they were about to get a harsh lesson. "We need to ready the ship for battle," Hayes instructed. "Get the weapons online, double-check the shields. We'll be facing a full-on assault, and we need to be ready." The crew moved quickly, each person falling into the rhythm of action. They had trained for this. They had known that one day they might have to face something like this, but facing the full might of the Galactic Council, that was something none of them had truly prepared for. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, ever the strategist, turned to her brother. "Captain, we need more than just a defense. We need a counterattack strategy. The dreadnought they're sending will be formidable. We can't just hope our shields hold up." Captain Hayes nodded, his mind already running through possible scenarios. "I know. We'll need to get creative. We're not just going to defend ourselves. We're going to make them regret ever underestimating humanity." In the depths of space, the dreadnought made its way toward the human ship. Its hull gleamed in the void, massive and imposing. It was the pinnacle of the Council's technological might. Its weapons were designed to obliterate, its shields near impenetrable. It was a symbol of the Council's power, a weapon that had never been defeated. But the humans aboard the ship didn't know that. They didn't fear the dreadnought. They knew their own strengths, their own ingenuity. They had something the Council's vast armada didn't: the will to fight, the drive to survive. And now, with the Council's wrath looming over them, they would show the galaxy just what humanity was capable of. As the two ships moved closer to each other, the tension was palpable. The time for talking was over. The time for action had begun. And in that moment, Captain Hayes knew one thing for sure. This fight wasn't just for humanity's survival. It was for their future, for their place in the galaxy. And they wouldn't let the Council take that away from them without a fight. The first shots were fired, and the battle for the galaxy had begun. The tension in the control room was unbearable. Every crew member aboard the human ship could feel it, the weight of the approaching battle. The massive dreadnought was mere moments away, and Captain Aiden Hayes knew that every decision he made from this point forward would determine their survival. There was no room for mistakes. "Captain, the dreadnought is coming into range," Lieutenant Sarah Hayes called from the weapons station, her voice steady, but filled with the urgency of the moment. She had prepared for this scenario, but now that it was actually happening, the pressure was overwhelming. "We've got about 2 minutes before they launch their first attack." "Understood," Captain Hayes replied, his voice cold with resolve. He wasn't going to let fear or doubt take hold. The time for fear had passed. The only thing that mattered now was survival and striking back. "All hands, brace for impact," he ordered, his gaze never leaving the view screen that displayed the terrifying size of the oncoming dreadnought. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Its sleek, dark hull seemed to absorb the light, its weapons ready to unleash destruction. This was a ship designed to crush, to dominate, to erase anything in its path. But Captain Hayes wasn't afraid. Humanity had survived worse. And now, they would fight back. The crew quickly made their final preparations. Shields were reinforced, and weapons were primed. The human ship wasn't built for a direct confrontation with such a behemoth, but they had something the Council's forces couldn't predict. They had ingenuity. The first salvo from the dreadnought came without warning, a barrage of energy blasts so powerful that the ship trembled as if it was going to break apart. The shields flared up with the impact, but they held firm. Captain Hayes felt the jolt through the deck, but the ship held together. "Shields holding steady," reported Ensign Corrin, his voice filled with relief, but not yet any triumph. The dreadnought was just getting started. "We're not going to survive if we just sit here and take it," Captain Hayes said, his tone sharp and commanding. "Prepare to retaliate. We've got one shot at this. Make it count." Sarah Hayes nodded, her fingers flying over the console. The human ship's weapons were powerful. There was no doubt about that. But they weren't as advanced as the Council's. They couldn't match the dreadnought's firepower in sheer strength. What they could do, however, was be faster, more creative, and more unpredictable. And right now, that was their greatest advantage. Locking onto their weak points, she said, her eyes focused on the screen. "Now, fire." A streak of blue energy shot from the ship's main cannons, a precise hit aimed directly at the dreadnought's engines. The shot landed with a deafening crash, and for a split second, it looked as though the massive ship had absorbed the blow without any visible damage. But then, something shifted. The dreadnought's engines sputtered, and its movements slowed. A wave of hope rippled through the crew. "We've hit them. We've slowed them down." Lieutenant Sarah Hayes shouted. "Good work," Captain Hayes said, his voice tinged with pride. "Now we follow up. Keep the pressure on. We're not out of this yet." But the dreadnought wasn't going down without a fight. It retaliated with terrifying speed, unleashing a barrage of missiles that shot toward the human ship. This time, the impact was brutal. The ship shuddered violently as the missiles struck the hull, rattling the crew and causing sparks to fly from various consoles. "Damage report," Captain Hayes barked, gripping the armrest of his chair as the crew scrambled to assess the situation. "Shields at 40%, Ensign Corrin called. "Hull integrity compromised in several areas. We're still intact, but we got to keep moving." "We can't keep taking hits like this," Sarah said, her voice tight with frustration. "We need to disable their weapons before they fire again." Captain Hayes was already thinking ahead. The dreadnought might have superior firepower, but it was big, slow, and clumsy. If they could outmaneuver it and hit it in the right spots, they might have a chance. "Full power to engines. We'll use their size against them," Hayes ordered. "Ensign, prepare a disabling shot to their weapons array. We have one shot. Make it count." The crew worked in unison, quickly adjusting their course and firing once more. This time, the energy blast was aimed precisely at the dreadnought's weapon systems. The shot struck home, and a brilliant flash of light illuminated the void of space as a massive explosion erupted from the dreadnought's side. For a moment, there was silence. The crew held their breath, watching the screen in disbelief. Had they really done it? Then, a groan of relief escaped from the crew as the dreadnought's weapons went silent. Its massive turrets hung limp, disabled for the time being. They had done it. The human ship had made a significant dent in the Council's war machine. "Direct hit to the weapon systems," Sarah exclaimed. "They're down. We've got a chance now." Captain Hayes smiled, but the victory was short-lived. The dreadnought was far from finished, and the battle was far from over. But the humans had shown that they could fight. They could stand up to the mighty Council, and for the first time, the Council might actually begin to question whether they had made a mistake. The battle was just beginning, and humanity was proving that they weren't going to let the galaxy walk all over them. "Prepare for the next wave," Captain Hayes commanded. "We're just getting started." The atmosphere aboard the human ship was charged with a new sense of hope. They had crippled the Dreadnought's weapons system, a victory that was impossible to ignore. But even in their moment of triumph, the crew knew they were still a long way from winning this fight. Captain Aiden Hayes stood at the front of the command deck, his eyes scanning the tactical map that appeared on the holoscreen in front of him. The Dreadnought was wounded, but it wasn't down. It was still moving, still trying to re-engage with them, and it still had its deadly missiles. "Do we have enough time to reload the weapons?" Hayes asked, his voice steady, but filled with an undercurrent of tension. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, now working tirelessly at her station, nodded. "Yes, but it'll take about 5 minutes to get the main cannons online again. We've got to hold them off long enough to finish reloading. If they get another shot at us, we're in trouble." "We need to keep them away from our hull," Captain Hayes said, narrowing his eyes. "Get us into position to make another run. We have to stay one step ahead of them." The human ship, though damaged, was still in fighting condition. It wasn't as massive or as well equipped as the Dreadnought, but it had one crucial advantage: speed. The ship was agile, capable of weaving through incoming fire, and that's exactly what they needed now. If they could keep the Dreadnought off balance long enough, they might be able to finish the job. The crew was working at a fever pitch now. The seconds felt like hours as they rushed to make repairs and reload weapons, knowing the fate of their ship, and possibly their species, rested in the next few minutes. "Captain, incoming missile barrage," Lieutenant Sarah Hayes warned. Without hesitation, Captain Hayes barked, "Brace for impact." Full speed ahead. The ship jolted as the crew braced for the inevitable impact. Shields flared up as the missiles hit, rattling the hull and sending sparks flying from several consoles. The crew grimaced as they held on tight. The human ship was no stranger to taking hits, but every strike brought them closer to their breaking point. "Shields at 20%, Ensign Corrin shouted. "Hull integrity, still holding, but we can't take another round like that." Captain Hayes's mind raced. They couldn't afford to be on the defensive for much longer. They needed to turn the tide completely in their favor. If they were going to survive this battle, they had to do something drastic, something the Dreadnought wouldn't expect. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Captain Hayes ordered, his eyes never leaving the tactical map. "We'll make one more run, but this time, we'll hit them from above. We'll take them by surprise." Sarah Hayes quickly adjusted their ship's trajectory, calculating the perfect approach. They couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. One wrong move could end their fight for survival. With every second, the pressure mounted. "All systems are go," Sarah said. "We're ready for the maneuver." "Let's make it count," Captain Hayes replied, his voice low but filled with determination. With a quick burst of acceleration, the human ship shot forward, darting into the Dreadnought's blind spot. The Dreadnought's sensors scrambled to lock onto them, but it was too late. The human ship had already made the jump, positioning itself above the larger vessel. "Now," Captain Hayes shouted, "fire everything." The ship's weapons lit up, releasing a deadly hail of plasma and energy blasts that struck the Dreadnought's vulnerable upper surface. The Dreadnought shuddered under the impact, its shields flickering and struggling to hold against the onslaught. Direct hits on the hull. Sarah called out, "We've breached their outer layer." "Keep it up," Captain Hayes urged. "Don't let them recover." But the Dreadnought was far from defeated. It began to rotate, trying to bring its remaining weapons to bear on the human ship. Its missile pods shifted, and the threat of another devastating barrage loomed large. "Get us out of here," Captain Hayes ordered. "Evasive maneuvers, now." The human ship banked sharply to the side, narrowly avoiding the incoming missiles that exploded around them, sending ripples of debris into the vacuum of space. The ship's engines hummed as it executed a quick roll to dodge another incoming salvo. For a moment, the crew watched in disbelief as the dreadnought struggled to regain control. Its weapons were failing, its systems were in disarray, and it seemed to be losing its grip on the situation. The tide of the battle was beginning to shift, but the humans knew they had to keep pushing. They couldn't afford to let the dreadnought recover. "Ensign Corin, get a lock on their power core," Captain Hayes shouted. "We need to end this now." Corin's hands moved quickly across his console, his fingers dancing over the keys. "I've got a lock. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The human ship's main cannon fired once again, sending a brilliant burst of energy towards the dreadnought's exposed power core. The blast connected with a catastrophic explosion. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield. And for a moment, everything went silent. The dreadnought's massive form shuddered violently, and its once proud silhouette began to crumble. The power core had been hit, and the vessel was no longer capable of holding itself together. "Captain, it's over," Sarah said softly, almost in disbelief. Captain Hayes allowed himself a brief moment of relief before turning his attention back to the ship's systems. They had won. Against all odds, they had defeated a behemoth of the Galactic Council. But even as the crew cheered, Captain Hayes knew that this victory was just the beginning. The Council would be furious. They would come for humanity again. And next time, they wouldn't underestimate the power of a Deathworlder. "Well done, everyone," Captain Hayes said. "But the war is just beginning. Get ready for whatever comes next." The crew fell silent, knowing the truth of his words. The human ship, battered but triumphant, drifted in the silent void of space. The battle was over, but the cost had been steep. Their ship was scared from the ferocious exchange of fire, and the crew was physically and emotionally drained. They had faced a weapon far superior to theirs, yet they had emerged victorious. Captain Hayes stood on the bridge, staring at the wreckage of the once mighty dreadnought floating in the distance. Its hull was a mangled mess of metal and twisted steel, and the fire in its heart had long since died. The explosion had been the dreadnought's death knell, but it had taken a toll on the human ship as well. The hull was cracked, and the internal systems were strained. Their victory had come at a high price, but it was a price they were willing to pay. "We did it," Sarah Hayes said, her voice quiet as she wiped the sweat from her forehead. "We actually did it." "But at what cost?" Captain Hayes replied. "Our ship's in bad shape, and we got a whole galaxy of enemies who won't be happy about what just happened." It wasn't just the damage to their ship that weighed on him. It was the knowledge that they had made a powerful enemy. The Galactic Council, which had once regarded humanity as a weak and insignificant species, had now been humiliated by a single human crew member. The power dynamics had shifted forever. The communication system beeped to life, breaking the silence in the control room. The voice that came through was cold, full of disdain, and barely veiled anger. "This is Admiral Vekran of the Galactic Council," the voice crackled. "You have made a grave mistake, human. You may have won this battle, but you will soon realize that the galaxy will never forgive you for what you have done. The Council will hunt you down. Your actions will have consequences far beyond what you can comprehend." Captain Hayes' eyes narrowed. He had been expecting this. The Council wasn't going to let a little defeat like this slide. They had been humiliated by a single human engineer, and they would stop at nothing to restore their pride. "You think this is the end?" Captain Hayes spoke directly into the comm. "It's just the beginning. We've shown you what humanity is capable of, and you'll never forget it. If you want to try and bring us down, be my guest. We'll be ready for you." A tense silence filled the room, and then the comm clicked off. The threat was made clear, but Captain Hayes wasn't intimidated. If anything, it only fueled his resolve. Humanity had proven its worth. They had proven that they weren't just another species to be overlooked. They had taken on the might of the Galactic Council and walked away victorious. "Captain," Ensign Corin said from his station, We've received several distress signals from other human colonies. They're asking for help. Already? Captain Hayes replied, his brow furrowing. The Council must have already sent out reinforcements to deal with them. Yes, sir, Corrin said. They're being attacked. It's not just a few ships. It's a full-scale assault. The Council wants to make an example of us, and they're starting with the colonies. Captain Hayes clenched his fists. The war had only just begun. The Galactic Council would retaliate with everything they had, but humanity had something the Council didn't resolve. And they had something even more valuable, each other. We're not going to run from this fight, Captain Hayes said, his voice firm. Set a course for the nearest colony. We're going to show the Council that we will fight for our people. No one is left behind. His crew nodded in agreement. Despite the challenges ahead, there was no fear in their hearts. They had faced the impossible and won. Now, they would do it again. They would fight for every human colony, every life, and for the future of humanity itself. As the ship's engines roared back to life, the crew readied themselves for what was to come. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now they would see the full extent of humanity's power. The war was far from over, but humanity had proven one thing for certain. They would never be overlooked again. The Council would learn that humanity was not to be underestimated, and that, above all, humanity was willing to fight for its place in the galaxy. With the ship in motion and a renewed sense of purpose, Captain Hayes stood tall at the helm. They had already won the first battle, but it was only the beginning. The fight for the future of humanity had just begun. Prepare for battle, Captain Hayes said, his eyes locked on the vast, starry expanse ahead. We're taking the fight to them. As the human ship made its way toward the distant colonies under threat, the atmosphere aboard was tense but focused. The crew had been through a lot already, battles, injuries, and near-death experiences. But now, the real test was ahead. They were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for the future of every human colony in the galaxy. Captain Hayes sat in the command chair, his eyes fixed on the holographic map that displayed their course toward the nearest colony. The Council's attack was swift, brutal, and without mercy. But they hadn't accounted for humanity's resilience. They hadn't anticipated what a determined Deathworlder could do when pushed to the edge. Captain, Ensign Corrin's voice broke the silence. We're getting closer, but the enemy fleet is already in orbit. They're preparing for something big. We're not going to have the element of surprise this time. Hayes didn't flinch. We don't need surprise, he said, his voice steady. We need strategy. They might have the numbers, but we have the heart. They've underestimated us once, and now we'll make them regret it. The crew exchanged looks of quiet determination. They had seen what the Council could do. They had felt the weight of the galaxy's power press down on them. But now, they had something more. The conviction that came from knowing they had nothing to lose. Humanity had been backed into a corner, and when a species like humanity was pushed to the limit, it fought back with everything it had. We can't afford to make mistakes, Captain Hayes added, his voice firm. Everyone, to your stations. We move as one unit. This is it. We fight together, or we don't fight at all. The crew nodded, each member feeling the weight of the moment. They had seen the power of the Council. They had seen their massive fleets and advanced technology. But what they didn't realize was that humans were different. Humans had a power that couldn't be quantified by starships or lasers. Humanity had the will to survive, to adapt, and to rise from the ashes. As the ship entered the orbit of the colony, they saw the enemy fleet waiting for them. A terrifying sight. Dozens of enemy ships, massive and intimidating, filled the sky above the colony. The Council's fleet was massive, but it wasn't invincible. The human ship, though smaller, was faster, more agile, and had something the enemy couldn't understand. A crew willing to fight to the bitter end. All systems are online, Lieutenant Drayton said from his console. We're ready to go, Captain. Engage the first phase of the attack, Captain Hayes commanded, his eyes locked on the fleet. Let's show them that humanity doesn't back down. The crew moved with practiced precision, the ship vibrating as it powered up its weapons. They were outnumbered. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the fire in their hearts, the determination in their eyes, and the knowledge that this was the moment they had been waiting for. The human spirit could never be extinguished, and they were going to prove it to the entire galaxy. The ship fired its first salvo, the blasts cutting through the blackness of space and striking the nearest enemy ship. The Council fleet returned fire, but the human ship was already moving, darting to the side and dodging the incoming blasts. The battle was chaotic, a whirlwind of explosions, laser fire, and ships maneuvering through space. But amidst the madness, one thing was clear: humanity was not going to lose. "We've got incoming from all sides," Ensign Corin shouted, her hands flying over her controls. "But they're not as coordinated as us. We can break their formation." Captain Hayes watched as the enemy ships tried to close in, but their efforts were clumsy compared to the precision of the human ship. They might have had the numbers, but humanity had the skill. "Focus on the enemy flagship," Captain Hayes ordered. "Take it down. If we can cripple their command, we'll break their will to fight." The crew responded with a synchronized effort, the ship's weapons locking onto the massive flagship of the enemy fleet. The ship shuddered with each blast, but the crew pressed on. The flagship was powerful, but it wasn't invulnerable. The human crew had learned a hard lesson from their previous battle, and now they were putting that knowledge to use. As the flagship took hit after hit, Captain Hayes knew they were closing in on victory. The Council hadn't expected a fight like this. They hadn't expected humanity to be capable of so much. And now, as the flagship began to break apart, it was clear to everyone. The tide of the war had turned. "Sir, the flagship's shields are failing," Lieutenant Drayton reported. "One more hit, and it's gone." "Give them everything we've got," Captain Hayes ordered. "Let's end this." With a final, coordinated attack, the flagship exploded in a blinding flash, its shattered remains drifting into the blackness of space. The enemy fleet, seeing their leadership destroyed, began to retreat. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The crew cheered, their faces filled with exhaustion but also triumph. They had done it. They had fought back against the greatest power in the galaxy and won. The battle wasn't over yet, but the first step had been taken. "We've shown them what we're made of," Captain Hayes said, his voice filled with pride. "Now let's make sure they never forget." The human crew had sent a message to the galaxy. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The Council had thought they could crush them, but they had underestimated the true power of the human spirit. And now, the galaxy would have to deal with the consequences.